grapes and tomatoes for salmonella contamination. Did the gentleman have some reservation or objection to this regulation that the FDA operated on? And I'll yield to him.
Well, I think it just, if the gentleman will yield, I think it just points out that the regulations we have in place are working. We have, in agriculture, we only have jurisdiction over meat and
gentleman is recognized for an additional 1 minute.
We only have jurisdiction over meat, and about 20% of the actual food safety is under the jurisdiction of the Ag Department. If FDA was anywhere near as competent as USDA is in terms of inspections, we wouldn't have these problems. But, frankly, FDA should not be regulating this. The Department of Agriculture should be regulating it.
If you think that this bill should go further, then why would FDA need to have a 3010 be made more likely to kill regulations that control jobs and health?
Well, I mean, we're talking about a bigger issue here, but all this bill does is it gives you folks a better chance to understand what's actually going on here. And this whole food safety issue has been a big problem because people are off on tangents that don't have anything to do with reality. And hopefully in this new procedure, we're going to be able to more fully vet this so the public can understand what's going on here. Salmonella exists in all kinds of products. It's going to be there. It's always going to be there, no matter what you do. What you have to do is have a regime in place so you can determine, the salmonella before it gets into the food supply.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Chairman, first of all, I want to thank Mr. Peterson for his comments, and then I also want to recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. Costa, also a member of the Ag Committee, for 3 minutes.
Nice, for 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in support of H.R. 3010, the Regulatory Accountability Act of 2011. As a co-sponsor of this legislation, I understand that this is not about eliminating existing regulations, but it's about making sure that regulations do not eliminate the ability of businesses to thrive, to create jobs in places like the San Joaquin Valley that I represent, especially during these difficult economic times. Many major regulations can cost upwards of $100 million to the industries affected by the rule, but they also impact consumer costs as well. While business people in my district are carefully watching their bottom line, ill-advised regulations can hamper the ability to create jobs and get our economy going. So this legislation is also about jobs. This legislation ensures that regulations are fully vetted before they are put in place. Despite the best intentions, we often see bureaucrats proposing rules without any practical knowledge of how they will work in the real world. H.R. 3010 guarantees that the business communities, farmers in my district, can know when regulations are being proposed, that they can have a seat at the table to explain how it would affect their work and be implemented. This legislation, therefore, is also about transparency and accountability. Agencies will be required to provide information to the public about the potential economic impacts of the proposed regulations. As the President said this September in his job speech, we should have no more regulation than health and safety and the security of the American people require. Every rule should meet that common sense test. After my time is complete. This legislation helps us ensure the executive branch regulations will meet that common sense test. By modernizing our regulatory process, we can guarantee that regulations are enacted that truly are in the best interest of the public, the business, and the American people, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time.
Mr. Speaker, I yield the balance of our time to the distinguished gentleman from Georgia, a ranking subcommittee chairman in Judiciary, the time that remains.
The gentleman from Georgia is recognized for 2 1/4 minutes.
Would the chairman yield to me for
yes, I will.
for just a few seconds? Would you tell me now or at some future time which health regulations you would like to get repealed or withdrawn?
I don't think that I can give you a specific on a health regulation. I think what we're really talking about here is the impact of risk assessment versus risk management to ensure that we provide the best protection for health and safety when we implement regulations.
Sure. So you don't have any complaint against FDA at the present time?
The current proposed rules, I mean, some work better than others, some are implemented better than others.
But you're okay with them?
Well, I think the current point that you made earlier about the proposed issue with regards to certain commodities show that the current regulatory system is working.
So you don't want to improve it?
No. I want to ensure that we meet good standards and good tests, and this legislation, I think, does that.
I thank the gentleman for yielding.
The gentleman has reclaimed his time. Now does the gentleman yield to the gentleman from Georgia? Yes. Is the gentleman from Michigan?
Yes, sir.
The gentleman from Georgia is now recognized for 1 1/4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in opposition to this bill, the Regulatory Accountability Act. Instead of creating jobs, the Tea Party Republicans are assaulting the very regulations that keep us safe and promote fairness to consumers. I'm disturbed by this assault on regulations that protect health, safety, and well-being, and the financial well-being of 99% of the Americans. By this majority, the Tea Party Republicans, who, having been elected as a result of all of the secret money received from the Wall Street corporations during the 2008 elections, are now clearly beyond any reasonable doubt, are now doing the bidding of these Wall Street corporate interests. They're doing the bidding of them by this kind of legislation that would remove the kinds of regulations that protect the health, safety, and well-being of 99% of the American people. It's not fair, it's not right, no jobs are being created, and this bill is a travesty. And I yield back the balance of my time.
All right, gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Chairman, I yield myself the balance of my time.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, our troubled economy forces many Americans to tighten their financial belts as they enter this holiday season. It is especially frustrating that the typical American worked more than 2 months, about 77 days, this year to pay for the cost of government regulations alone. For the unemployed, the news is even worse. Official unemployment has hovered around 9% all year. When the unemployed and underemployed and those who no longer seek employment are counted, the effective unemployment rate reaches almost 16%. But rather than add much-needed jobs to the economy, the Obama administration has only added job-killing regulations that burden businesses and stifle economic growth. The administration counts 410 new major rules in its regulatory agendas for 2010 and 2011. Mr. Chairman, that is 4 times the number of major rules than during the first 2 years of the previous administration. And the White House has reported to Congress that for most new major rules issued in 2010, the government failed to analyze both the cost and the benefits. Many more major regulations are now in the works. There is no assurance that the administration will adequately consider their costs and benefits either. The Regulatory Accountability Act provides the cure for this epidemic of regulatory cost. It is a bipartisan, bicameral piece of legislation that requires agencies to do a better job of determining whether new regulations are really needed. And when regulations are necessary, it requires agencies to find the lowest cost alternative to achieve its goals. In other words, you can still achieve the goals, but at the least costly way possible. The Regulatory Accountability Act will not stop federal agencies from issuing needed regulations, but it will stop them from imposing unjustified regulatory costs. In conclusion, I urge my colleagues to support the bill, look forward to its final passage, and before I yield back, I want to recognize first the ranking member of the Judiciary Committee and then myself for a minute.
The gentleman is recognized for...
I thank the chairman for yielding to me, because we want to acknowledge that the committee's parliamentarian, Allison Hallatai, on her last day of service to the committee, has been an expert, has ruled fairly on all matters of legislation that falls within the committee's jurisdiction, and has been valuable to all the members on both sides of the aisle. We've come to rely on her excellent judgment and experience, and on behalf of the Democratic members of the committee, we wish her well in her future endeavors. And I thank the gentleman for yielding.
And Mr. Chairman, I'll reclaim my time and add also that Allie Hallatai has served us well on the Judiciary Committee for 6 years. She's been on my personal staff for 2 additional years. She has also been a Deputy Chief of Staff for the full Judiciary Committee as well, in addition to having served previously on the Immigration Subcommittee. We value all of her expertise, her talents, her dedication, and her conscientiousness. All those wonderful attributes are going to be missed, but we do wish her well in her next position. And Mr. Chairman, I will yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back his time. All time for general debate has expired. Pursuant to the rule, the amendment in the nature of a substitute printed in the bill shall be considered as an original bill for the purpose of amendment under the 5-minute rule and shall be considered read. No amendment to the committee amendment in the nature of a substitute shall be in order except those printed in Part B of House Report 112-296. Each such amendment may be offered only in the order printed in the report by a member designated in the report, shall be considered read, shall be debatable for the time specified in the report, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and an opponent, shall not be subject to amendment, and shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question. It is now in order to consider Amendment Number 1, printed in Part B of House Report 112-296. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Wisconsin seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment Number 1, printed in Part B of House Report Number 112-296, offered by Ms. Moore of Wisconsin.
Pursuant to House Resolution 477, the gentlelady from Wisconsin, Ms. Moore, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlelady from Wisconsin.
And thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I rise today to offer an amendment to H.R. 3010, and my amendment is quite simple. It would ensure that an executive agency takes into account the needs of our nation's most vulnerable, at-risk subpopulations, including veterans, low-income individuals, and the elderly, when considering new action. This so-called Regulatory Accountability Act would undermine at least 25 health and safety rules that would have a disparate impact on these subpopulations. You know, the authors of this bill continue this sideshow by bringing bill after bill to this House floor, claiming that they will create jobs by limiting the size and scope and reach of government and repealing regulations that help and protect millions of Americans, balancing profit over people. Like magicians, they try to convince the American public with a sleight of hand and deception that the cost to industry far outweighs the cost of health and safety protections. Once we get past all the flashing lights, smoke, and glitter, we see that this bill, like others that we're considering today, is just no different, Mr. Chair. H.R. 3010 would do far more than simply modify the executive rulemaking process. It would require agencies to adopt the least costly regulations, a race to the bottom, Mr. Chair, instead of taking the most protective steps necessary to ensure the health and safety of Americans, especially those most vulnerable. It would add dozens of new procedural hurdles without any promise of additional resources. It would tie up agency action for years when we know that so many Americans desperately need help right now. These tough economic times are hard for everyone, Mr. Chair, especially those who are disproportionately affected by the economic crisis. We have no longer have time for tricks, illusions, and silly gags. Study after study shows us that low-income communities live in the most toxic areas of our country. We must stop this bribery, trickery, and come back to reality. We must agree that it is good policy for executive agencies to consider our nation's veterans, who, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, face an 11.7% unemployment rate, substantially higher than the national average. We must consider the disproportionately damaging health effects that air pollutants have on low-income communities that can't afford to move to wealthier areas, as the EPA considers implementing provisions in the Bipartisan Clean Air Act. And we must agree that the executive branch must take into account the needs of our nation's seniors, who have become the subject of a dangerous debate in Washington over the future of entitlement programs. It's time to put down the magic wands and pick up our voting cards and support legislation that protects the least of these. And I would urge my colleagues to support this amendment, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlelady's time is reserved. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas rise?
Mr. Chairman, I oppose the amendment.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I'm prepared to close, so I'll reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserved. Gentlelady from Wisconsin.
Thank you. You know, the President Obama has really curtailed more regulations than George W. Bush. So it is really mistaken that this president has not taken into account the needs of industry. But I think that when you get to a point that you just want to abolish all regulations in favor of the so-called bottom line, someone has to draw the line. And I think that this amendment draws the line at subjecting seniors, veterans, and low-income people to air pollutants, people who are particularly vulnerable. And I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady yields back her time. Gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Chairman, I'll yield myself the balance of my time.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, this amendment regrettably seeks special consideration in rulemaking for a handful of groups. But the bill seeks to declare no favorites and gives no special policy treatment to any group. Instead, the bill creates even-handed procedural reform that benefits all groups with greater transparency, accountability, and public participation in rulemaking. Perhaps the amendment is motivated by a concern that regulatory outcomes not shortchange the needs of seniors, veterans, and lower-income families. But the bill already assures that these groups and all others will obtain the protection they need. The bill always allows agencies to achieve the regulatory objectives that Congress has set. Generally, if an agency can reach the goal with a lower-cost regulation, though, of course it should. But if a costlier regulation is needed to protect public health, safety, or welfare, including to protect seniors, veterans, and low-income families, the agency can adopt that regulation. The agency just needs to show that the benefits justify the additional cost and the interests protected fall within the scope of the statutory provision that authorizes the rule. In this reasonable, balanced way, the bill guarantees statutory objectives will be met while we at least achieve real regulatory cost control. That is a win-win solution for everyone in every group. The federal government does not always need to do something more costly for special groups. It needs to always do something more cost-effective for everyone. I urge my colleagues to oppose this amendment, and I'll yield back the balance of my time.
He yields back his time. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentlelady from Wisconsin. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion of the chair, the noes have it.
Mr. Chair, I would ask for a recorded vote.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentlelady from Wisconsin will be postponed. It's now in order to consider Amendment Number 2, printed in Part B of House Report 112-296. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment Number 2, printed in Part B of House Report Number 112-296, offered by Mr. Olson of Texas.
Pursuant to House Resolution 477, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Olson, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Olson.
I thank the Chair. My amendment clarifies one of the provisions in H.R. 3010 regarding rulemaking. The bill before the House states that when making a rule, an agency shall consider potential costs and benefits associated with proposed rules, including direct, indirect, cumulative costs and benefits, and estimated impacts on American jobs. My common sense amendment specifies that the agency proposing the rule shall, and this is a quote from the amendment, estimate the net gain or loss in domestic jobs, end quote, in their jobs market analysis, impact analysis. My amendment will ensure that the public has a full understanding of the real impact to American workers before the proposed rule becomes effective. At a time of record unemployment, we must properly balance federal regulations to minimize job losses before these jobs leave our shores. This will not stop federal agencies from issuing needed regulations, but it will stop them from imposing unjustified and unintended regulatory costs without informing the American people how these regulations will impact jobs right here in the United States of America. While regulations are necessary, my amendment requires, when they're necessary, my amendment requires agencies to find the lowest cost alternative to achieve the regulatory goals. I thank my fellow Texan Chairman Smith for his support of my amendment, and I ask my colleagues to support as well. Reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time is reserved. Who claims time in opposition? Gentlelady from Texas.
My good friend from Texas has introduced an amendment that I wish that all of us could have joined with his amendment and Mr. Johnson's amendment that was not allowed in order. We've made a complaint not necessarily on one amendment, but on this underlying bill. And the amendment now adds yet another analytical requirement to the already numerous analytical requirements H.R. 3010. I would have liked to have joined Mr. Olson on making this just a job creation amendment or a job creation bill. But this adds, as part of the bill's super mandate, which overrides existing statutes like Clean Water Act, Clean Air Act, and the Occupational Safety and Health Act, all of which reflect bipartisan legislative agreements to prohibit or limit consideration of costs in the rulemaking process. While I certainly agree with the idea of net job creation, H.R. 3010 does absolutely nothing to create jobs with or without the addition of this analytical requirement. We can't cure this bill, and we might have been able to do so with an amendment by Mr. Johnson that exempts all rules that result in job growth to be considered on the floor. After all, it was allowed for H.R. 527, the other bill that we are considering today. I don't know why we can't come together, as someone would say, and put forward bipartisan amendments that talk about creating jobs. Mr. Chairman, with that, I yield back my time.
I thank the Chair, and I appreciate the comments from my colleague from Houston from Texas. And I wish this amendment was not necessary. But with the current administration, the regulatory environment has gotten out of control. The best example is the Environmental Protection Agency and all the rules and regulations they've imposed upon the oil and gas industry and the power industry in our home state of Texas. The best example of that is testimony from the administrator herself, right here on Capitol Hill. When asked if she considered any sort of job losses, impacts on jobs or the regulations, she said, no, not our business. That's wrong. If the agency is going to propose changes to some regulatory rule, they need to let the American people know how it's going to impact the jobs right here at home. Again, it's a common sense amendment. I urge my colleagues to support it. I yield back the balance of my time.
Questions on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Texas. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion of the Chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. 3. It is now in order to consider Amendment Number 3, printed in Part B of House Report 112-296. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Texas seek recognition?
I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 3, printed in Part B of House Report number 112-296, offered by Ms. Jackson Lee of Texas.
Pursuant to House Resolution 477, the gentlelady from Texas, Ms. Jackson, and a member opposed, Ms. Jackson Lee, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlelady from Texas.
I thank the chairman very much. I wish today was spent really dealing with job creation rather than diminishing the social safety net for the American people, something that we've fought long and hard for. But let me give you some good news. The unemployment has dropped to approximately 9%, I believe, or a little less. It means the country's economy is going in the right direction. And the time that we're spending on the floor on these bills are job killers. We'd much rather have spent our time passing the American Jobs Act, putting money in investment in infrastructure, rehiring firefighters, teachers, and law enforcement officers. And certainly we don't need to jeopardize this little baby's future with thwarting the opportunity for making sure our food safety regulations are unfettered on behalf of the American people. My amendment is a simple clarification. The way the rules exist today is that the agency, in its wisdom, thinking about the safety and security of the American people, food safety, the environment, clean air, clean water, have the right, the discretion to give preliminary 90-day notice. What do we do in this bill? We demand that the agency give a 90-day notice in order to propose a rule and prior to having it published in the Federal Register. My friends, there is no doubt that rulemaking is complex, but in many times rulemaking requires quick action. All my amendment does is put back in the discretion of the agency to determine whether they can have a 90-day notice. The GOP claims that slashing regulations is a way to create jobs. Well, let me tell you what President Reagan and President G.H.W. Bush said. As for the idea that cutting regulations will lead to significant job growth, Bartlett said in an interview, it's just nonsense. It's just made up. Bruce Bartlett was the economic advisor, under Presidents Reagan and G.H.W. Bush. Indeed, as BLS data show in 2010, only 0.3% of people who lost their jobs in layoffs were let go because of government regulation intervention. But I will tell you this little one's life will be in jeopardy because of the intrusive and the excessive 60-step process that these legislative initiatives are requiring. Someone would say hogwash. The GOP claim that there has been a tsunami of regulations under President Obama is also a myth. It is simply a myth. I ask my colleagues to support the amendment. I reserve my time.
Gentlelady's time is reserved. Who claims time in opposition? Gentleman
Mr. Chairman, I oppose the amendment.
Gentleman is recognized for 5
And
minutes.
I'm prepared to close, so I'll reserve the balance.
Gentleman reserved. Gentlelady from Texas.
Let me just expand on this point regarding President Obama. This administration has approved fewer regulations than the predecessor, George W. Bush, at this same point in their tenures. Furthermore, Bloomberg finds that the average annual cost of regulations under President Obama at about $7 billion to $10 billion is close to the average around the cost from 1981 to 2008. This GOP bill tilts rulemaking in favor of special interests. 60 new analytical steps. Can you imagine? You'll be bogged down spending money and using government time and using the taxpayers' dollars to keep from protecting them, to keep from protecting this innocent child, to keep from protecting children with asthma, to keep from protecting people who need to have clean water, to keep from protecting those who need to have, if you will, a food safety requirement that keeps them from being impacted by E. coli. How unsensible, if I can use a word in quotes, is that? As a coalition for sensible safeguards, which includes Common Consumer Federation of America, this bill would make it virtually impossible for federal agencies to ensure that American families are protected from tainted food, unsafe drugs, predatory financial schemes, dirty air and water, and dangerous workplaces. Give us a break. Let us follow in the footsteps of President Bush, President Reagan, and our predecessor, President Bush, and realize that this regulatory scheme is broken. Pass the Jackson-Lee Amendment and save lives, and let's celebrate that unemployment is going down and find a way to create jobs. I yield back my time.
The lady's time has expired. Gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Chairman, I yield myself the balance of my
Gentleman is
time.
recognized.
Mr. Chairman, one problem in rulemaking is the practice of agencies to negotiate regulations behind closed doors with a few interested parties, then propose and adopt a predetermined rule. To help cure this problem, the bill requires advance notice of major and high-impact rules that agencies may propose. These are the rules that cost $100 million or $1 billion or more, respectively. The advance notice requirement assures that those who bear the cost of these high-cost regulations have an opportunity to shape agency decisions before they become entrenched in predetermined rulemaking proposals. It also dramatically increases the transparency of the most important agency rulemakings. And of course, if emergency rules are needed, advance notice may be waived. The amendment, on the other hand, makes advance notice discretionary, not mandatory, with the agencies. That guarantees that advance notice will rarely be used. It eliminates much-needed transparency, and it only helps those who negotiate rules behind closed doors that ram through deals through the rulemaking process, ignoring public comment. The amendment may arise from a concern that advance notice not unduly slow down emergency rules. If that is the case, there is no need for concern. Like the existing Administrative Procedure Act, the bill allows agencies to issue emergency rules before they complete ordinary procedure. So I urge my colleagues to oppose the amendment. It hurts the bill, it hurts the process, and I'll yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back his time. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentlelady from Texas. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. Gentleman from Texas.
Vote on that amendment.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentlelady from Texas will be postponed. It is the chair's understanding that amendment number 4 will not be offered. It is now in order to consider amendment number 5, printed in Part B of House Report 112-296. For what purpose does the gentleman from Virginia seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 5, printed in Part B of House Report number 112-296, offered by Mr. Connolly of Virginia.
Pursuant to House Resolution 477, the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Connolly, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Virginia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. H.R. 3010, seductively titled the Regulatory Accountability Act, would block every single new or pending federal regulation, including those regulations Congress has already directed agencies to write. This bill would neuter the Dodd-Frank Wall Street reform, protecting consumers. It would block tougher food safety oversight responding to last year's salmonella outbreak. It would gut public health laws jeopardizing clean air and water and workplace safety. It would effectively repeal 25 separate public health, consumer protection, and environmental laws Congress has already passed. No wonder the Statement of Administration Policy noted that the President would veto the bill if passed. With this legislation, the House Republican leadership has now attempted to pass more than 170 pieces of legislation, riders and amendments to attack public health and the environment. But H.R. 3010's impacts would not stop here. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and Securities Exchange Commission would not be able to implement consumer protections mandated by law, including common sense rules like prohibiting investment banks from betting against their own clients on the stock market. The EPA would not be able to complete the Toxic Air Pollution Control Rule, which Congress directed it to implement 21 years ago. Our regulatory system already is so slow that this critical public health standard, which would reduce mercury and arsenic pollution, has been taking since 1990 to develop. Apparently, taking 2 decades to limit mercury pollution is much too fast for the sponsors of this bill. This bill uses seemingly innocuous requirements to create a tangle of red tape so thick that it would be impossible for any federal agency, frankly, to issue meaningful regulation ever again. This bill uses several clever provisions to create regulatory gridlock. The first seems harmless. It requires agencies to use the lowest cost requirement when issuing regulations. It directs agencies to consider alternative regulatory approaches proposed by industry. This model emulates the structure of the Toxic Substances Control Act, which provides a case study for failed environmental legislation. Like this bill, the Toxic Substances Act requires regulations to adhere to the lowest cost solution. What's wrong with that? For this reason, polluters have been successful in challenging almost every proposed regulation on the premise that there are lower cost alternatives. For example, asbestos. Despite its well-documented health hazards as a known carcinogen, it's still legal to use asbestos in America, unlike in 50 other advanced countries, because asbestos manufacturers challenged the EPA's ban on asbestos and won the case in court when they showed that prohibiting asbestos was not the lowest cost regulatory option. The Toxic Substances Act is so ineffective that in its 35 years, a mere 5 of 22,000 potentially toxic chemicals have actually been regulated under its authority. This bill would require regulatory agencies to analyze every single alternative proposed by industry, a Sisyphean task that would effectively preclude any new regulation from ever again being issued against recalcitrant polluters. The other clever provision of this bill, which also appears innocuous, is the requirement that agencies perform a cost-benefit analysis for every regulatory alternative, even spurious ones, proposed by industry. Of course, Congress wants agencies to consider both the cost and benefits of regulations. That's why agencies already do provide full cost-benefit analyses of proposed regulations. Require agencies to waste time analyzing every, even spurious, industry alternatives indefinitely delays any additional regulation. There are only 2 differences between this bill and the majority's previous attacks on the environment. First, because of its broad scope, this bill would be more destructive. And second, its clever language conceals how thoroughly it would eviscerate regulatory agencies. That's why I introduced this amendment, Mr. Chairman, to exempt public health and safety laws from the purview of this bill. The Republican leadership claims it supports public health and safety. Well, let's give them the opportunity to prove it. I urge my colleagues to support this common-sense amendment to protect public health and safety. Without this change, this so-called Regulatory Accountability Act guts the important public health, safety, and consumer protection standards we've long counted on in this country, and it would, in fact, not hold industry accountable for any of its future actions. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back his time. Gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Chairman, I oppose the amendment.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, the amendment carves out of the bill essential sectors of regulation and guidance. These include all rules and guidance documents on food safety, workplace safety, consumer product safety, clean water, and clean air. In many cases, these are precisely the agency actions that impose the most cost without producing enough benefits. A good example is the Environmental Protection Agency's recent proposal to control mercury emissions from coal and oil-fired power plants. EPA estimated that the rule would cost $11 billion annually to achieve at most just $6 billion in total mercury reduction benefits. That's a cost-to-benefit ratio of almost 1,200 to 1. Proponents of regulation have nothing to fear from the bill's provisions to prevent excessively costly rules like this. The bill always allows agencies to achieve the statutory objectives Congress has set. Those objectives include protection of food, workplace, and consumer safety, as well as of clean air and clean water. All the bill requires is that agencies consider the cost and benefits of regulatory alternatives and, wherever possible, adopt the least cost regulation that achieves that goal. If a costlier rule's benefits justify its additional cost and the rule is needed to protect public health, safety, and welfare, the agency must adopt it. The agency just needs to show that the public health, safety, and welfare interests it seeks to protect are within the scope of the statutory provision that authorizes the regulation itself. That is balanced reform that protects public health, safety, and welfare, and the American economy, and the American taxpayers, and the small business owners of America. So I urge my colleagues to oppose this amendment, and I'll yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back his time. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Virginia. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Opinion of the chair, the
Mr.
ayes
Chairman.
have it. Gentleman from Texas.
That I request a recorded vote.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Virginia will be postponed. It is now in order to consider Amendment Number 6, printed in Part B of House Report 112-296. For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 6, printed in Part B of House Report number 112-296, offered by Mr. Nadler of New York.
Pursuant to House Resolution 477, the gentleman from New York, Mr. Nadler, and a member opposed each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from New York.
Chairman, I yield myself 4 minutes.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I rise in support of my amendment, which would exempt rules proposed by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission from the new impediments to the regulations in this bill. Mr. Chairman, there they go again. The right-wing Republican House majority is practicing more voodoo economics. This time it's the belief that overregulation is the cause of our slow economic growth and high unemployment rate. There is no evidence to support this position. None. In actuality, according to the Economic Policy Institute, economy-wide studies do not find a significant decline in employment from regulatory policies. And some regulations actually create jobs due to regulatory compliance. More broadly, findings from the Office of Management and Budget in both Republican and Democratic administrations show the benefits of regulations far outweigh their costs. Most recently, OMB found that the benefits from major rules issued between 2001 and 2010 yielded benefits ranging from $136 billion to $651 billion, and imposed costs of between $44 and $62 billion. Despite these facts, the right-wing Republican House leadership presses ahead with what it calls regulatory reform. Today's bill, in the name of so-called reform, adds over 60 new procedural and analytical hoops agencies and departments must jump through before a regulation can be issued. The result is to impede, obstruct, and delay the attempt of government to accomplish one of its most basic functions, protecting the health and welfare of our people. Not surprisingly, groups who care about protecting public safety, health, and the environment, such as the Natural Resource Defense Council, Public Citizen, Defenders of Wildlife, U.S. PIRG, oppose this bill. According to the Coalition for Sensible Safeguards, which represents a coalition of many such groups, this bill will grind to a halt the rulemaking process and is nothing less than an attempt to roll back our critical public safeguards and promote industry interests ahead of protecting the health and lives of American citizens. Americans should rightfully be scared that this bill will put their health and safety at risk. One example that highlights this fact is the subject of this amendment, nuclear power. The risks and danger of nuclear power were made all the more clear this year. In Japan, we all watched in horror when that country was devastated by a meltdown of the Fukushima nuclear power plant. And we are now told that over 10% of the land of that country will be unusable for decades. Later, Virginia was struck by a relatively rare but strong earthquake felt up and down the eastern seaboard. It caused the nuclear power plant near the epicenter to have to go offline. Because of the catastrophes that can result from disasters, be they natural or man-made, at nuclear power plants, prevention of meltdowns is the key. That's why I'm a co-sponsor of H.R. 1242, the Nuclear Power Plant Safety Act of 2011, sponsored by Representative Markey, which is designed to help do that. Among other changes, it would require the NRC to impose rules requiring plants to upgrade to withstand severe events like earthquakes and to have enough backup power so as to avoid a meltdown for a significant length of time. The NRC must have the ability and flexibility to impose new regulations quickly to safeguard the health and well-being of Americans. Impeding the Nuclear Regulatory Agency's ability to regulate will not save one job, but might cost millions of lives in the event of a disaster. Sadly, this bill makes the ability to regulate nuclear power plants all but impossible. And for me, this concern hits close to home. A nuclear power plant at Indian Point, about which many people, including myself, have had concerns for years, lies less than 40 miles away from the center of New York City in my district. There are 20 million people living within a 50-mile radius around the plant. The same radius used by the NRC as the basis for the evacuation zone recommended after the Fukushima disaster. Indian Point sits near two earthquake fault lines, and according to the NRC is the most likely nuclear power plant in the country to experience more damage due to an earthquake. To keep my constituents, and indeed all Americans, safe, I'm offering this amendment today. It would exempt the Nuclear Regulatory Commission from the onerous new requirements for rulemaking imposed by this bill. With this amendment, the NRC would have the ability to safeguard public health and safety as it should. And we must pass this amendment so that rulemaking for nuclear disasters is not impeded. And I urge the passage of this amendment, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time is reserved. Gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Chairman, I oppose the amendment.
Gentleman claims time in opposition. Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, does the gentleman from New York have any time remaining?
1 minute remaining.
Mr. Chairman, I'm prepared to close and reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserved. Gentleman from New York.
Mr. Chairman, the argument for this amendment is very simple. This bill would make it almost impossible by putting 60 new requirements in the way of agencies to make new rules. It would make it almost impossible for rulemaking, and in fact, especially for emergency or safety rulemaking in the event that we perceive the necessity for such a thing. At least for nuclear power plants, the potential for disaster, the potential for killing mass numbers of people we have seen. We've seen it in Chernobyl. We've seen it at 3 Mile Island. We've seen it at Fukushima. At least for that situation, allow the government rulemaking agency to continue to have the power to protect our people. A vote for this amendment is a vote to continue to have the government have the power to protect our people. A vote against this amendment and for this bill is a bill to put the risks of all our people, to put the lives of all our people at risk, and to prevent the government from protecting the lives of our people, and it would be almost an immoral vote. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Chairman, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, the amendment creates a special carve-out from the legislation's requirements for regulations and guidance of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Regulation of the nuclear power industry, however, should go through the same rulemaking process as other regulations. In this way, all interested parties will have the best opportunity to test their assumptions about nuclear power and nuclear waste. Perhaps the amendment is motivated by a concern that the legislation could prevent the Nuclear Regulatory Commission from issuing emergency rules and guidance or rules that adequately protect public safety. That concern, however, is unfounded. The legislation preserves agencies' ability to make interim final rules for good cause. This exception certainly would cover emergency rules from the Commission. The bill also allows agencies to adopt alternatives to least cost regulations if interests of public health, safety, or welfare require costlier rules. Only two conditions need to be satisfied. First, the costlier rule must produce benefits that justify the additional cost. Second, the benefits must serve public health, safety, or welfare interest within the scope of the statutory provision that authorizes the regulation. Surely the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and any other agency can adequately protect public health, safety, and welfare within those conditions. So I urge my colleagues to oppose the amendment and yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back his time. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from New York. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, on that I ask for a recorded vote.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from New York will be postponed. It is now in order to consider Amendment 7, printed in Part B of House Report 112-296. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Texas seek recognition? I have an amendment at the desk. The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 7, printed in Part B of House Report number 112-296, offered by Ms. Jackson Lee of Texas.
Pursuant to House Resolution 477, the gentlelady from Texas, Ms. Jackson Lee, and a member opposed, each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlelady from Texas.
I thank the chairman very much, and I think it's important to reinforce to our colleagues that many of us are on the floor of the House this morning as these bills have come through the Judiciary Committee, and I am just struck by the fact that I'm trying to reflect on the vast reach that these bills have taken up. We even have another bill just like this next week, and I'm, for the life of me, trying to reflect on where the data is that these bills are going to create jobs or that there is a problem. And that is what the task of the members of the United States Congress are. This body and the other body, we are to come as part of the people's house and solve problems. For example, I'm going to be calling for hearings on the heinous actions of sexual abuse against our children in institutions such as Penn State and Syracuse and places around this country that are probably yet uncovered and yet undiscovered. That is a problem. Our children being abused, sexually abused, and the vileness of the cover-up. We're sent here to solve problems. And frankly, I am concerned that H.R. 3010 does not solve a problem. I'd rather be addressing the vileness of sexual abuse as an epidemic across this nation. But today we are here with a regulatory bill. No evidence that anybody has been disturbed by the regulations that have been put in place to save the lives of the American people. So my amendment is a simple one again. Having been on Homeland Security since its origins, meaning the committee, and before the department was even created, as a member of the Select Committee on Homeland Security, having gone to ground zero, and as I reflect, seeing the smoke still billowing from the ashes, and looking at the rescue and recovery teams, they had not yet stopped seeking to recover those who tragically were in the midst of this hellish quagmire of terrorism. How can you not see the reason in waiving this bill or exempting all rules promulgated by the Department of Homeland Security? It is the newest department. It has the greatest scrutiny in place for the kinds of regulations that are involved. Since the creation of the Department of Homeland Security in 2002, we have overhauled the government in ways never done before. Steps have been taken to ensure that the communication fails that led to 9/11 do not happen again. The Department of Homeland Security has helped push the United States forward in being innovative in protecting our nation. Don't stifle that. Don't get in front of blocking us from stopping Times Square bombers and shoe bombers and Christmas Day bombers that would impact the American people. Don't stop us from helping the Coast Guard do its duty, dealing with the travails of the waterways of America, the many huge ports that would open its doors to heinous acts with cargo. That's what they're telling us to do by making sure Homeland Security, securing the nation, has to be subjected to these amendments. I know about the vulnerabilities in security firsthand. We see these all the time. There are 350 major ports. They need to do their work. They don't need to be stifled by a legislative scheme that puts in place 60 new provisions to get a regulation out. How insane. Help us secure America. I'm asking my colleagues to support my amendment. I reserve my time.
Gentlelady's time is reserved. Does the gentleman in Texas claim time in opposition?
Mr. Chairman, I oppose the amendment.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I'm prepared to close or reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentlelady from Texas.
What does my amendment do? It simply says that if it is a regulation dealing with the securing of the American people, it is exempted from 60 various look-sees, delaying tactics, long-windedness that will prevent that regulation from coming through to help the likes of the Coast Guard do its job, Customs and Border Patrol do its job, ICE do its job, the TSA dealing with aviation security to do its job. How
clearer do we need to be? With cities and towns across the nation facing threats, indeed every day ensuring the security of the homeland requires the interaction of multiple federal departments and agencies, as well as operational collaboration across federal, state, local, tribal, and territorial governments, non-governmental organizations, the private sector. How in the world can we do our job and protect the American people? How can we provide small businesses with the opportunity for new technology procurement by layering and layering their ability to get this done? I ask my colleagues to stand with me in supporting the Homeland and Homeland Security. Vote for the Jackson-Lee Amendment that exempts Homeland Security regulations. For once and for all, let's be bipartisan on securing and protecting the American people.
Gentleman's time has
I
expired.
yield back.
Gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Chairman, I yield myself the balance of my time.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, this amendment seeks to shield the Department of Homeland Security from the bill's urgently needed rulemaking reforms. There is no good reason to provide that shield. For example, take the Department's rules to extend compliance deadlines for states to issue secure driver's licenses under the REAL ID Act. 10 years after 9/11, hijackers used fraudulent licenses to board airplanes used to murder 3,000 innocent Americans. The Department of Homeland Security continues to extend the deadline. Clearly, the Department of Homeland Security should not be exempt from the bill's provisions. So I urge my colleagues to oppose the amendment and yield back the balance of my time.
Goes back his time. Question is on the amendment offered by the gentlelady from Texas. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion of the chair, the noes have it. Gentlelady from Texas. Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentlelady from Texas will be postponed. Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, proceedings will now resume on those amendments printed in Part B of House Report 112-296, on which further proceedings were postponed in the following order. Amendment number 1, offered by Ms. Moore of Wisconsin. Amendment number 3, offered by Ms. Jackson-Lee of Texas. Amendment number 5, offered by Mr. Connolly of Virginia. Amendment number 6, offered by Mr. Nadler of New York. Amendment number 7, offered by Ms. Jackson-Lee of Texas. The chair will reduce to 2 minutes the minimum time for any electronic vote after the first vote in this series. The unfinished business is a request for a recorded vote on Amendment number 1, printed in Part B of House Report 112-296 by the gentlelady from Wisconsin, Ms. Moore, on which further proceedings were postponed and on which the noes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate the amendment.
Amendment number 1, printed in Part B of House Report number 112-296, offered by Ms. Moore of Wisconsin.
A recorded vote has been requested. Those in support of the request for a recorded vote will rise and be counted. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their vote by electronic device. This is a 15-minute vote.
The House finishing up work on the second of 3 anti-regulations bill. This one's requiring the federal agencies consider the costs and impact of regulations before issuing new federal rules. It also calls on departments to consider less intrusive alternatives. A series of amendment votes ahead of the final passage vote. Now, the House was going to take up a bill aimed at stopping a railroad strike, but yesterday the freight rail industry settled labor disputes with 2 of its unions and agreed to extend talks to a third. Without the agreements, the railway unions could have begun striking as early as Tuesday, when a federal cooling-off period was set to expire. But that will not happen today. This is the only legislation, this federal regulations bill. And again, amendment votes here, starting with an amendment by Gwen Moore of Wisconsin, which would ensure that agencies take into account whether a problem disproportionately affects veterans, low-income individuals, and families when considering rulemaking. This is a 15-minute vote, and all of the remaining votes after this will be 2-minute votes. Also on Capitol Hill today, the Senate yesterday rejecting 2 different measures dealing with the payroll tax cut. Sam Goldfarb is a Congressional Quarterly reporter. He's been covering the tax cut issue on Capitol Hill. What are you reporting this morning after House Republicans had their meeting?
Well, we're in the process of writing that story right now because that meeting just broke up. But it seems like the GOP conference is pretty divided, as it's been pretty much all year. There's a large number of conservatives who don't want to extend the tax cut at all, but leadership is forging ahead and trying to make that happen.
So there's not a unified House GOP plan for the payroll tax cut, which expires at the end of the year.
No, leadership presented the conference with a sort of a list of possible offsets to pay for an extension, but they haven't chosen specific offsets. And frankly, there are just a lot of people in the conference who don't want to extend it under any circumstances.
What are some of those offsets that leadership proposed?
Well, we don't know for sure. One would be a freeze on on the salaries of federal employees. That's something that was brought up in the Senate yesterday and that Senate Democrats rejected. And then we're hearing things like cuts to agriculture programs, tweaks to the Medicaid programs, basically things that have been discussed all year by these bipartisan groups that have been trying to reduce the deficit, but things that haven't actually made it into law yet.
On the Democratic side, are they working on their own measure, or are they going to follow Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid's lead on the plan?
Democrats in the House?
Yes.
They, I think, are just going to be following Harry Reid's lead, although Nancy Pelosi will be involved in discussions about what to propose.
And all of this because the payroll tax cuts expire at the end of the year. Same with unemployment insurance. What's the status there?
I talked to a conservative congressman, Jeff Flake, and he said that the main GOP concern is with the payroll tax cut. They do think that they can extend unemployment benefits. They might make some tweaks to the program, but that's more likely to happen than the payroll tax cut, although we still think the payroll tax cut will happen in some way or another.
Well, with the clock ticking toward the holidays and a deadline of December 16th to continue funding the federal government operations, what's being discussed on that front in terms of spending bills?
That is the usual debates. It's being hung up by there have been delays because Republicans are insisting on certain policy provisions that Democrats say are unrelated to spending, and they're trying to wrap it up into one big omnibus bill. But there's no. They've already passed some smaller. But it's unclear exactly what the resolution is going to be there.
Sam Goldfarb of Congressional Quarterly joining us from Capitol Hill. Thanks for that update.
Thank you.
On the House floor, the first of several amendment votes dealing with the second of three federal regulations bills that the House will be taking up. This one, which calls on would require federal agencies to take additional steps before issuing new rules. This is the first vote. It's a 15-minute amendment vote. The remaining amendment votes will be 2-minute votes. Sam Goldfarb reporting after that House Republicans meeting this morning, and just ahead of that, House Speaker John Boehner met briefly with reporters, saying that he's looking for common ground with President Obama on improving the economy. They urged the president, Republican leaders urged the president to set aside any differences, and they encouraged Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid to vote on 3 GOP jobs bills that recently passed in the House. This briefing is under 10 minutes, and we'll show you all of it during the remainder of this vote.
Morning, everyone. Any job creation is welcome news, but the jobless rate in our country is still unacceptably high. Today marks the 34th consecutive month of unemployment above 8%. And as you may remember, the Obama administration promised that unemployment would not exceed 8% if we passed their stimulus bill. That promise has gone unfulfilled. More than 300,000 Americans left the labor force last month. That means they stopped looking for work. And I think we should all be concerned about that. The House has passed a series of bills designed to remove government barriers to private sector job creation. There are now 25 bipartisan bills that have passed the House that are waiting in the United States Senate. It's all part of our plan to help America's job creators. It's been our focus all year. We have a plan, and frankly, if the United States Senate would take up these bipartisan bills, they'd find that there would be bipartisan support in the United States Senate as well. President Obama should use this opportunity to call on the Senate to move these bills that have passed by the House. The American people want action on jobs, and they want it now.
Good morning. Today's unemployment numbers certainly look good on its surface. When the rate of unemployment comes down, that's always good news. However, if you look at the number of new jobs created, there's just not enough new jobs being created in America. And we need to work harder towards that end to be able to provide people with a better opportunity. I know Americans are looking for some optimism around the holidays. We continue to try and stay focused on areas in which we can find common ground. I mean, we've looked at where we've been this session, and we have been able to find some common ground with the President when it came to the trade bills, when it came to the 3% withholding bill. There is an ability for us to set aside some differences and to find some common ground. And we look as House Republicans to continue to try and find those ways. Now, there are plenty of areas in which we disagree. But we don't believe we ought to start there. We ought to set aside this. We don't believe in higher taxes, and we don't believe in more spending. But we do want to work with this President in terms of finding common ground and seeing how we can create jobs. So if we can't see our way clear on those bigger issues, let's look towards how we can make incremental progress day by day to help the lives of Americans and to create more jobs for families across this country.
Okay. Well, although improved from last month, November still marks the 34th month where unemployment has been 8% or above. And as the Speaker has alluded, although encouraging when you realize 300,000 perhaps have just given up, it's even less encouraging. So again, 34 months of 8% unemployment or more in the Obama economy. 28 of the last 30 months, we've had 9% plus unemployment in the Obama economy. 13.5 million remain unemployed in the Obama economy. Small business startups, entrepreneurship remains at a 17-year low in the Obama economy. Meanwhile, House Republicans have passed 3 more jobs bills. We now have 23 of them stacked up like cordwood at the United States Senate awaiting action in the Democratic Senate. As our leader said, we will continue to try to work with the President and with Senator Reid and the Democrats, as we did on the free trade agreements on 3% withholding on the American Veterans Act. But it is time for the President to admit, after being able to enact all of the major tenets of his agenda, be it his health care plan, be it Dodd-Frank, be it the stimulus, that ultimately his policies are not working. And so we would ask, Mr. President, please tell Senator Reid to pass our jobs bills.
The question isn't really where are we today. The question is, where should we be? Remember, the Obama administration promised the American public that if the stimulus bill passed, that right now we would be under 6.5% unemployment. And instead, we're over 8.5% unemployment. So think about the remedies. Think about the opportunity moving forward. As has been previously mentioned, over 20 bills are pending, jobs bills that are pending in the United States Senate. And just imagine what things could be like if those were called up, passed, and signed into law. Our economy would be game on, we would be roaring forward, and we wouldn't be having a conversation stumbling around unemployment in the mid-eights.
Take a couple of questions.
Mr. Speaker, what is the House Republican plan for paying for an extension of the payroll tax cut and an extension of the unemployment benefits?
We're going to have that conversation with our members as soon as we leave here, and you'll know more about it soon.
Speaker Boehner, the message Democrats are putting forth is that Republicans are anti-middle class tax cut, the payroll tax cut that benefits the middle class, and that Republicans are only protecting the wealthy. And a lot of people are saying they're winning that messaging war. How do you respond to that?
Listen, I've got 11 brothers and sisters on every rung of the economic ladder. All right? My dad owned a bar. I know what's going on out in America. And the fact is that Republicans are trying to do everything we can to allow American families and small businesses to keep more of what they earn, to try to get this government off the backs of employers so that they can begin to hire people. And the other side can come out with all the rhetoric they want to come out with, but the facts are the facts.
Mr. Speaker, does the action in the Senate last night on both the Democratic and the Republican proposals in the payroll bill, particularly the very sound defeat of the Republican by mass defection on their side, does that make your job to work out something here harder, different? What's the future?
Who knows?
Oh, but does it? I mean, but seriously, I mean, this is an issue that is, this is one of the key issues in the next 3 weeks. You said you're going to talk to your conference here, but how give us some.
We're going to talk to the conference here in a few minutes, and I'm sure you'll have all kinds of answers to your question.
The Senate vote on the Republican alternative, seeing half of the party voting against the extension of the payroll tax, do you expect to see that kind of resistance and division among your Republicans to the idea of extending the payroll?
I would hope not. Thanks.
Thank you.
House leadership this morning, Republican leadership, and some reaction there, too, to the unemployment number. The Labor Department saying today the unemployment rate dropped to 8.6% in November. That's down from 9% in October. The Labor Department saying that employers added 120,000 jobs last month. On the House floor, this is the first of 5 amendment votes to another bill that proposes to curb federal regulations. This 15-minute vote is an amendment by Gwen Moore of Wisconsin dealing with whether an issue of federal rule should be issued when there is a problem that disproportionately impacts certain vulnerable populations, including veterans and low-income individuals. This is a 15-minute vote. The remaining amendment votes will be 5-minute votes. The House was to have taken up a possible bill aimed at stopping a nationwide freight rail strike, but they don't need to. An agreement has been reached, at least a tentative agreement has been reached. The Associated Press writing the agreements late Thursday with the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen and the American Train Dispatchers came just hours after Republican House leaders said they would move to vote today on emergency legislation to prevent that work stoppage. Again, 15-minute vote on the House floor. 4 more amendment votes will follow this.
87, the nays are 232. The amendment is not adopted. The unfinished business is the request for recorded vote on amendment number 3, printed in Part B of House Report 112-296 by the gentleman from Texas, Ms. Jackson Lee, upon which further proceedings were postponed, and on which the ayes prevailed by voice vote. The clerk will redesignate